I'm Jamie Levine, Executive Director of Elder Law and Advocacy, and today I am talking to attorney Caleb Logan about the bill tracking platform that he has built on our website. Thank you for joining us today, Caleb.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So I'm just going to read this intro because I don't want to miss anything. So Caleb has worked extensively on legislation in California, working to protect consumers and older adults. Those efforts somewhat address a legislative environment that is often dominated by private sector lobbying efforts. So it's incredibly important for us to be working on these bills. A lot of our work is done in conjunction with the California Low Income Consumer Coalition. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So I want to start with an introduction of the legislative work that you've done and also what inspired you to create this bill tracking platform on our website.
Right. So my legislative work, I suppose, started when, well, the I guess it originally started when I was an intern at Elder Law and Advocacy in 2019. At that point, we had been discussing electronic signatures and verification of that. And so we talked about a bill that would require the e-signing platforms to give people an audit trail with like IP address, email, things like that. And then at the same time, I think Elder Law had just recently joined CLICC at that point. And the big thing back then was property assessed clean energy financing, or PACE. And so there was a lot of work going on with that I was involved with behind the scenes, not with CLICC, but discussing different mechanisms of PACE with you and Carolyn Riley, the former executive director at that time. So that's how I got started. And then when I became a full-time employee at Elder Law in 2022, you had raised an issue to me about fixing one issue caused by a court decision that was published in 2010, or I believe it was 2010. I always want to say 2012 for some reason, but that led us to draft a bill that would have solved that issue that turned into SB 278, authored by Senator Dodd. And that bill did get passed the legislature, although it was ultimately vetoed by Governor Newsom. And last year we worked on AB 909 with Assemblymember Schiavo, who authored that bill. And that bill kind of collided with another bill, AB 83 by Assemblymember Valencia. And so the legislature decided that we need to take a step back and come back this year and focus on something new, maybe more of a collaborative approach. So we're not sure where that's headed for the current year, but that is kind of the basic trajectory, I would say, of what I've been doing with CLICC and through Elder Law.
That's awesome. It's interesting that you bring up the e-signature issue because it's so ubiquitous now, and the what we were trying to put in place, having the trail,
The audit trail?
the audit
Yeah.
trail, that's also ubiquitous pretty much in terms of what's available.
Yeah, although I still think they should have MAC addresses added to them.
Definitely, absolutely. Maybe we should work on that. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's an aside. So let's talk a little bit about the bill tracking platform that's on our website. What is it, and what are you doing with that?
So I designed it just as a table that gives basic information about bills relevant to our clients. Every year, I'm generally doing a roundup of the most recent bills that passed and will change things for our clients. And so I figured, why not just be tracking those throughout the year and seeing where they're going? That could lead to either knowing beforehand what is getting passed and what's coming into effect. But on the other hand, it could also lead to more legislation in the future. If some bill idea fails one year, it will very often come back, if not the next year, then maybe the year after that. And so it's a good way to track the ideas that are out there that are being considered and debated by the legislature. So to that end, it does also give the author of the bill and the district that they represent then where the bill currently is located. So if it's an assembly bill, it will start out in the assembly. If it's a Senate bill, it will start out on in the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
But then it will be parceled out to different committees. So there will be hearings on the bill in a particular committee that it's been assigned to. And once it gets out of the House or out of the assembly, it will go to the other house for the same process. And ideally, then it will go to the governor for signing. So the bill should keep uh, as accurate as possible a picture of where the bills stand. Things can, change pretty quickly. So it won't always be entirely accurate. We don't have an automated system pulling data from the California legislature website, and I don't know if that data scraping is legal actually, but that's another point. So yeah, that's the idea, and just to keep people aware of the bills that could impact them, as well as for us to be aware of the bills that are impacting our clients.
Yeah, it's great. Do you have any idea how many bills are passed in a year in California?
I don't actually, and it was just, I believe last year was the first year that there were new bill limits. So the number of bills that people can introduce actually got reduced,
Oh.
which means that there are fewer bills that will be considered. Um,
It's a really big number. Isaiah, could you actually just Google how many bills a year are passed in California? Because it's kind of overwhelming. I remember we get to
mhm.
the end of the year, and as attorneys, we have to be on top of the legislation that's coming into play in terms of how it's going to affect our clients.
Hmm.
And every year, it's just kind of a struggle because, sure, there are certain bills that are directly related to protecting seniors, but there are hundreds of bills. So,
Right.
what are we looking at here? Okay.
About 1,000.
800 to 1,200 bills a year. That's
Yeah.
astronomical. Like who, we're even for attorneys, that's an overwhelming number. But
Hmm.
for lay people, like who could possibly put in the amount of time to try to review every bill that might affect them?
Right. It is very difficult. And thankfully, the legislature does publish a subject matter, uh, basically just a packet online, a PDF that lets you see the bills by subject matter. And so that helps a little bit in terms of sorting out what is actually being considered, although it doesn't say whether it's died. It's just all listed there as
Yeah.
bills.
Yeah,
So,
that's helpful. But it's very nice for us to have this on our website because we're trying to highlight the bills that are going to be most relevant to us and to our clients.
yes, and also keep people aware of the status.
Right, exactly. Um, so I've chosen a few of the bills that are on the website right now. This is not a comprehensive review by any means, but I
Hmm.
would encourage anyone to who's interested to take a look at that web page. It's on our website, so you could go there, and if you click on the resource drop-down menu and choose Bill Tracker, you can get there that way. Or it's at elaca.org/bill-tracker.
Hmm.
And then the other thing that I think people should be cognizant of is who the sponsor is. Like, it's really important to see who is really working with us to try to find ways to protect consumers and to protect older adults. There are certainly certain legislators who've been very helpful in that way.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say actually Assemblymember Mainshine, who was recently termed out of the assembly, had been generally supportive of issues affecting older adults. So it's unfortunate that he's no longer there. And he was a representative of, I believe that where our office is located, his district didn't extend there, but where my parents live, it covered their area in San Diego. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Wow, that is actually It's really interesting actually to see where the legislators are
Hmm.
in terms of who's going to be able to support them in the future.
Hmm.
All right, so let's get into this. The first one that we're going to talk about is AB 871. So, can you tell us a little bit about that bill and where it's headed?
Yes, this is a bill by Assemblymember Stephanie that is meant to revise the mandated reporting law. This is a law that applies to financial institutions and requires them to report instances of suspected elder financial abuse or just elder abuse in general to adult protective services. And the bill essentially requires an annual training for staff on how to escalate situations to managers, as well as providing guidance on reporting to the Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3, that's run by the FBI.
That's really important because the current law has some deficiencies. Like there's some very good language that requires financial institutions to report suspected financial elder abuse, but there's no private right of action, which we've talked about in other episodes. So it's really important for us to try to bolster what's available right now legislatively.
Right, and there still won't be a private right of action with this bill, of course. There actually, each provision that it adds, it also says that it can't be a reason to bring a public lawsuit for the government. If they were to bring a lawsuit for a violation, they can't do it for this.
Oh, that's frustrating.
Very.
Um,
And I
yeah.
would say it's unclear how much it will really do. Professor Nina Cohn, who's a professor at Syracuse University College of Law, she has actually published research that mandated reporting laws don't have a significant impact.
Oh, really? That's disappointing.
Right, and maybe it could come down to lack of enforcement, though,
Yeah.
to your point.
Um, you mentioned adult protective services. I just wanted to um, kind of articulate what it means if the mandated reporter law requires a report to APS. That's kind of the front line for law enforcement, right? So it's
Hmm.
not just APS might have a social worker go out. That's how it gets escalated to the police department and the district attorney.
Right, well, especially in San Diego, where we do have the Elder Justice Task Force, it does connect people to more resources like that.
Right. All right. The second one here is AB 1717. What is that about?
This is an interesting law. So it increases the amount of Medi-Cal payments to dentists who are traveling to a Medi-Cal beneficiary's home or extended care facility. So it sets a minimum payment per visit and sets that to increase with inflation each year.
And so, why is that important that there's a minimum payment made?
Well, it's an interesting question because I think that there's a balance on the one hand with the costs that the state is covering, knowing that the federal government only contributes so much to Medi-Cal, with increasing access to healthcare. And so this bill, while it would increase the costs that the state is paying, theoretically could reduce future costs if dentists are getting out more and visiting more patients, doing more preventative care. That will reduce the number of more extreme procedures that are needed in the future, and it could also hopefully extend access to people in more rural areas where doctor or dentists would otherwise be less willing to travel just because they won't be paid enough to make it worth it for them.
Right. So Medi-Cal, which is called Medicaid in other states, but Medi-Cal in California, that is a needs-based program that covers people who are basically indigent, who wouldn't have access to medical care otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue for medical providers is how much they get reimbursed. And
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of doctors who basically just opt out of Medi-Cal. They don't accept Medi-Cal patients because don't they just don't feel like it's going to be compensated. They're going to be compensated well enough. And the history with dentists, there have been times when Medi-Cal didn't cover dentistry at all, and there have been times where it's covered it. But this is kind of an expansion of trying to figure out ways to get dentists to participate in the program.
Yes, and it is good coming off of the reintroduction of the asset limit for Medi-Cal, since California had eliminated the limitation that requires people to have a limited amount of assets to qualify, and then reintroduced it as of this year. I don't know of any clients personally that have been affected by that, but I imagine it is more likely to impact clients who have, savings built up over a time of work like ours. Uh, and so it's good that at least the people who are being supported by Medi-Cal will have the support they need, hopefully.
Yeah. The Medi-Cal rules change all the time. I mean, every year there are changes to the asset limit, income limit, and how spouses are treated, and what they cover, what they don't cover. So this is an interesting way to try to keep somewhat on top of who's eligible for Medi-Cal and what they're covering.
Mm.
The next bill is AB 1753.
Yes, this is kind of a follow-on bill from one that we worked on last year, actually, that helped the process for elder abuse restraining orders by requiring that filing fees be kept at zero cost for petitioners and also allowing them to file electronically. A lot of older adults can't travel to the courthouse, and so they need that electronic access. And so what this bill would do is pick up off of that and require parties and witnesses in workplace violence restraining order and private post-secondary school violence restraining order cases to appear at hearings remotely for no cost, which was a part of that last bill that I mentioned.
What was that
And
bill? The last one that you mentioned?
I can't recall the number off the top of
Okay.
my head. I believe it was 561.
And you
But
were involved with drafting that bill.
yeah, I wrote it to start off with, and so we got that passed. And this was actually, I'm a little surprised to see this as a bill, just because I don't know that the it it's hard to justify it in every circumstance, I think, as a practical matter.
Which part?
Um, I think that there's a question of how permissive procedure should be. So for restraining orders in general, definitely there's a big justification of people having access to the court through, for example, remote hearings at no cost.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on the other hand, it is a change, and so the court will might have to absorb some costs, although theoretically, since it's already been done for elder abuse restraining orders, domestic violence restraining orders, and civil harassment restraining orders, it's probably not going to be a cost on them. But domestic violence and elder abuse, especially, are kind of the more favored restraining orders, just because those are where we see uh, the most critically impacted
Mm.
clients or victims who need those restraining orders, and so this doesn't feed into that rationale.
Mm.
But from a perspective of court access, it's definitely a good call.
Yeah. Great. I think we're going to, how many more? Two more? Yeah, two more. Three more. AB 1819.
Right, AB 1819 was an interesting one. So I hadn't really known much about this, but California law requires certain buildings to have an AED, that's an automated external defibrillator. And so this bill would add senior centers with a capacity of over 50 people to that list, and then staff would need to be trained on how to use it. And of course, people would be immunized from liability for using it as long as they aren't intentionally misusing it, essentially, or otherwise grossly negligent. That's in line with other Good Samaritan laws that we have. The idea is that we want to not make people afraid that they'll be civilly liable or criminally liable for trying to help someone. So the idea is that we want to encourage helping of people. And then this is actually based off of some data published that shows that AEDs are used only 4% of the time when a person's heart stops, and that's outside of the hospital. So, not very often, but they are very useful. And actually, San Diego had Project Heartbeat, which has it started in 2001, so quite a bit of time ago at this point, 25 years. But through that, San Diego has seen 10,000 AEDs distributed and 208 lives saved. So I think that if people are worried about the cost, they might say, well, it doesn't make much of an impact, only 208 people over 25 years. But at the same time, life saved is, I think we can't place a value on that. So it should definitely be a good bill that I would expect to get passed and hopefully also take over any concerns about maybe if someone is unsure of how to use CPR, they can rely on the AED instead and give that electric shock to restart someone's heart.
Yeah. What was the name of the project that you mentioned that has been in place for 25 years?
Project Heartbeat.
Heartbeat.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of it, but it started in San Diego apparently.
Is that a nonprofit initiative or government? What do you know?
I believe it was government initiated, but
Huh.
I'm not 100% sure.
Interesting. The last bill that I wanted to highlight is SB 991, and then we also have kind of a follow-up on that one. But what is the bill?
Yes, this is a bill that focuses on residential care facilities for the elderly, known as RCFEs, and some people also call them assisted living facilities. So they are a type of mandated reporter, and so they legally have to report instances where they suspect abuse is taking place. The issue is that those reports aren't they don't make any distinction on the type of abuse that actually is happening. So this bill would require the Department of Social Services, when they are investigating and substantiating these complaints, to categorize it based on the type of abuse that is happening. And I believe I misspoke earlier. This is focused on the state reporting, not the RCFE reporting themselves, but actually when the state is investigating and then reporting based on their findings and substantiations.
Okay. And that's going to provide better information to industry and government? How's that?
Yes, the idea is that the more data out there, the better regulators would be able to target reforms. And so if we see, let's say, one area has a particular high incidence of financial abuse, but another area has a particularly high incidence of physical abuse, there could be patterns like that that are identified by regulators or legislators that could lead to better, more targeted change in the future.
Oh, great. And so the corollary, not really exactly pertaining to that, but I was having a conversation with our nursing home rights attorney, Andrew Thompson, and he brought up that skilled nursing facilities in California have a very institutionalized right to appeal when they're being discharged. And that doesn't exist for RCFEs, which is kind of an oversight because the people who live in RCFEs are pretty needy. And if they are in a situation where they're just being basically removed unlawfully, it's very helpful not to have to avail yourself of just landlord-tenant law. Landlord-tenant law, it moves slowly. And in situations where elderly people are in danger because of their health issues, it's important for us to have some kind of mechanism that makes sure that they're not being just put out into a dangerous situation. What do you think about that idea?
It's absolutely a great idea, and I think would go towards fixing a misconception that people have, which is that the RCFEs are not categorized by the law as medical providers. at the same time, as you mentioned, these are very needy patients. That's why they're sometimes called assisted living facilities, because people need assistance to live with their, activities of daily living, as the law likes to call it, and medical providers. And one thing that's also to note there is that often memory care facilities are just RCFEs,
Wow.
but at the same time, they're suggesting that they're providing medical care by calling themselves a memory care facility. So, providing for the medical needs of people with dementia or other, memory loss issues. So, I think that just the provision of a hearing itself would be useful, but also targeting that fact that people believe that these are medical providers in some capacity at least, even if it's not as detailed as a skilled nursing facility, would be helpful.
Right. We were talking to Andrew and I did a webinar with Tony Chicotel last week, and this issue came up, and Tony was expressing that the hearing mechanism that's available for SNFs, skilled nursing facilities, is really predicated upon the fact that they are Medi-Cal recipients, and that because they receive federal money and Medicare as well, there's increased scrutiny on everything that happens in those facilities. But right now, there are certain pilot projects where Medi-Cal is paying for certain care in RCFE. So that
Mm.
could also be one way for us to try to seek some kind of hearing mechanism that would be available for residential care facilities.
Right, that is a good point, and it'll be interesting to see how those pilot programs work out.
Yeah, I mean, Medi-Cal's been around for a very long time, and they've
Mm.
kind of had a very rigid way in terms of how they provide funding. And so they are making
Yeah.
certain strides now to try to seek alternatives because it's very, very expensive to pay for skilled nursing care. I think it's over $12,000 a month that they're paying currently,
Yeah,
maybe
I wouldn't
maybe
be
much more than
surprised.
that. But if you could have a lower level of care, like an RCFE or even some in-home care, that could be much less expensive. And I think that's what they're trying to explore. So to have some kind of hearing mechanism available in those situations would be very helpful.
Absolutely, and I don't know, it just adds to the conversation we are having as a society as we age and live longer, what resources are going to be available for us.
Absolutely. So I think that that's everything I wanted to cover. I do want to just mention again that the bill tracker is on our website. Right now, it's under the resources dropdown. We might make a separate tab for it, possibly in the future, but it's going to be a great way for people to be able to see what's coming up in terms of legislation that affects elderly people in California. And I'm sure we will talk about it again as laws are suggested or are being enacted. And thank you very much for curating it and creating it and for making it available to all of us.
Yeah, definitely happy to help out and glad that hopefully people will be more informed, and at the very least, we will be more informed.
Great. Thank you, Caleb.
Thank you.